Welcome, everyone. I am so glad you are here. As we get started, please continue to put your location and faith tradition in the chat. I'm Reverend Carol Devine. I'm the faith director of Eco America's Blessed Tomorrow program. And the Eco America office is located in our nation's capital, which sits on the unceded lands of the Nagashank people. But I work from home here in Lexington, Kentucky, on the land that was cared for thousands and thousands of years by the Shawnee people who were forced from this place to reservations in Oklahoma. Some of the actions that I personally have taken is to learn more about the Shawnee tribe. I receive the Shawnee Nation's newsletter and donate regularly to them. All of us live on traditional native homelands, and I encourage you not to just find out the land that you live on that is occupied, but to learn about the people and their culture and what you can do to be an ally. Blessed Tomorrow is so honored to be one of the 46 partner organizations and denominations that make up One Home, One Future. And if you haven't joined One Home, One Future, I encourage you to check it out and do so today, as there is no downside. One Home, One Future supports and resources congregations and people of faith to visibly care for creation and take action on climate justice. Everything is free. And I am so very honored to be with my friend and colleague to moderate this webinar today with Avery Davis Lamb. Avery is the Executive Director of Creation Justice Ministries and a very dear friend of mine. I've been on the board of what we call CJM since 2011, and I encourage all Christians to learn more about and to connect with and make use of CJM. Avery, do you want to say a little something there?
Yeah, thanks, Carol. Hi, everyone. Good to be with you. As Carol said, my name is Avery Davis Lamb. I'm the Executive Director of Creation Justice Ministries. We work with Christian traditions from the individual level to the denominational level to equip, mobilize, and educate around the work of protecting, restoring, and rightly sharing God's creation. So we're delighted to be co-hosting this today with One Home, One Future. On the note of the native lands where you live and solidarity with Indigenous peoples, just today we launched a resource called Truth, Healing, and Repair, a Christian call to environmental justice and solidarity with Indigenous peoples. I'll drop a link to that in the chat. It's a way to take a first step in a long journey of repairing fractured relationships with our Indigenous siblings. So you can access that here.
I appreciate that so much, Avery. It's very timely being in November, and we give great thanks. All of us are here today, though, to hear from Reverend Henry Brinton. Reverend Brinton is the senior pastor of Fairfax Presbyterian Church in Fairfax, Virginia. He has served as pastor there since 2001. Henry grew up, though, in Maryland, is a Duke and Yale Divinity School grad. He is married to Nancy. They have 2 adult children. Henry is an author of, I don't know how many books now, Henry, but more than 6, I think, and has written a lot on religion and culture for the New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today, Huffington Post. He also writes for the preaching journals, Homiletics and Proclaim, and he contributes to the current events-based adult education curriculum, The Wired Word. He enjoys boating on the Potomac River and competing in endurance sports, sometimes to his own physical demise. But we are so thankful to have you here today, Henry. It's been a delight for me personally to get to know you a little bit, to read this incredible book. And as I turn it over to you, I read the book a little while ago, as you know, but I pulled it back out just to refresh my memory. And I just started writing down the different themes of this book and was just really struck at just how many things and thinking about the setting of a small town and a pastor and a Methodist congregation. But some of the things I wrote down were, the struggles of different faiths, including Islam and the Wiccan. Of course, poverty is in there. environmental racism, climate disasters, the idea of, is it God who is judging us? There's the whole thing about clergy groups, the pastors, and what does inclusion mean for them and that struggle. There's veterans and the war in Afghanistan. There's Honduras and kind of global poverty. The whole thing around Justice Plaza. So there's the KKK that shows up historically, and racism issues, gangs, drugs, LGBTQ. Anyway, I just was like, oh my gosh, that's right. There's just so many. It's a great novel, and I just really encourage everyone, if you haven't read it, to do so. But I want to turn it over to you now and just give great thanks that you're with us today.
Oh, thank you so much, Carol, for that introduction, and to you and Avery for the invitation to be part of this call today. It's just so great to connect with all of you and talk about these issues that are so important to all of us. It's been wonderful to be a host church here for the National Faith and Climate Forum that launched last year. That was a great introduction to you and your work, Carol, and our church will be hosting again this coming spring. And Avery, you were in our pulpit here on Earth Sunday last spring, and what a great message you brought us. So just wonderful to be in partnership with both of you and your organizations. So this is exciting for me today to come and talk with you about Windows of the Heavens. This is my attempt to work on some climate solutions through fiction. I think that storytelling is such a powerful way to engage people. We, as human beings, do not like to be lectured to. I think that's a universal feeling. Within the church, we hear people say, don't preach at me. And so that's an occupational hazard for preachers. But I think since at least the time of Jesus, people have found that stories can engage people and draw them into issues in a way that other presentations do not. So this is my very modest attempt to engage the larger community in issues of climate solutions through storytelling based in the small town of Occoquan, Virginia. So what I'd like to do now is introduce you to the book. And since a picture is worth 1,000 words, I have a PowerPoint that will accompany a few short readings to draw those of you who have not read the book into the story. If you've read the book, I thank you for that. And this will be a kind of a review, but for those who haven't read the book, perhaps this will introduce you to some of the themes and get you curious about reading the book. So give me a moment to share here. So I hope everyone can see this screen. Carol, can you give me a thumbs up? Visible? All right, great. So the book is called Windows of the Heavens, and it is the second in a series of books I've written, which I call the Mill Street Mysteries. The first book is called City of Peace, and this book introduces the main character, Harley Camden, who is a Methodist pastor. Harley suffers a terrible personal tragedy in the first book. His wife and daughter are killed in a European terrorist attack. And so he spirals downward into grief and anger and is sent by his bishop to the little town of Occoquan, Virginia. This is the town where I happen to live now, and I've been so intrigued by the history and the people of this town. In the first book, City of Peace, the town faces a murder, the murder of a young Muslim woman, and a terrorist threat. So if you like small town mysteries, maybe City of Peace is where you'd like to start. The second book is Windows of the Heavens. And this book is based on three inspirations, which I will briefly introduce to you. The first is the town of Occoquan. The second, faith and fitness. And the third, a region in Honduras called Copan. And they actually do all fit together. And they bring in a lot of the themes that Carol introduced you to in her recitation of some of what is in the book. So let me just share with you about what has inspired this particular book. The first is the town of Occoquan. This is a river town of about 1,000 people. It's always had about 1,000 people, although it is nestled into the great Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. So the town is about 30 minutes south of D.C., and the name means at the end of the water, or at least that's what the town says, since it is nestled at the farthest navigable portion of the Occoquan River. But linguists have done some work on the Native American language that gave rise to the name Occoquan. And what they have found more recently is that the name actually means a grove of trees. So there is a strong sense of the town's rootedness in the nature of its environment, whether it means a grove of trees or at the end of the water. The town is very historic. It was the home of the Dog Indians for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so, Carol, thank you for your land acknowledgement. Occoquan acknowledges its rootedness in the Dogue people. And you can see that at least one representative of the original occupants of this land appear on the shoulder patch of our local police department. The colonists arrived in 1734, and the town had a very rich Civil War history, which I explore in the third book in my Mill Street Mysteries, a book called War Bug. And that's a fascinating history of conflict and reconciliation in Civil War times. And today, the town is very much racially, culturally, and religiously diverse. We have a mosque in town. We have Christians of various stripes. You can see Muslim women in headscarves on the street walking next to Latinos preparing for various celebrations in their culture and religion. And we even have a coven of Wiccans who play a role in my book, Windows of the Heavens. The second inspiration for this book is faith and fitness, very important to me personally. This is the challenge of keeping body and soul together. And this is going to play a role in some of the reflections on climate issues because as a Christian, I do not believe that there is a division between body and soul. I believe there's a strong relationship between creator and creation. And that is going to play a role in this book as well. So for me, faith and fitness involves endurance exercise. I have taken part in a marathon, a triathlon, or a century bike ride every year since the year 2000. And so this is an important part of my physical fitness and also my spiritual fitness. This plays out in the book in some important ways. I make a case in the book for there being no separation between spirit and body, what my theology professors used to call psychosomatic unity. I believe that in our reading of the scripture, we find that Jesus enjoyed bodily pleasures, taste, and touch. He was very much a part of the world. And in fact, I understand Jesus to be God in human form, the creator in creation. Now, we could certainly get into some deep theological discussions here. I'm not saying that this is going to be embraced by every Christian or a person of every faith, but for me, this is central, that Jesus was the creator in creation. The third inspiration is the region called Copan, Honduras. It's in southwestern Honduras. It's been the site of numerous mission trips. Here you can see a picture from last year's mission trip. Our church went to Copan and we installed solar panels on the roof of a Christian youth camp. So you can see two members of my church, Cromwell in the black t-shirt, and Pete Rogers in the yellow t-shirt or long sleeve shirt, installing solar panels on the roof of this youth camp with the help of some of our Honduran contractor friends. And this has been a great project for us. We're going to be returning in the spring and installing a second array of solar panels. Our friends in Honduras do not have much money, but they have a lot of sun. And so this has been something that has helped them to save a lot of money and be more environmentally attuned themselves as well. So for me, Copan is an opportunity to serve and also to develop partnerships. And this region plays an important role in the book as well. In particular, I want to talk a little about Copan's history. Copan is the location of some fantastic Mayan ruins. There is a tremendous amount of beautiful stone artwork in this city by a river. And the great mystery of Copan is why the civilization collapsed. It went from being a capital city in the Mayan Empire to nothing in a very few short years. So one of the mysteries of the book, in addition to the mystery of what happens in Occoquan, is the mystery of why this city collapsed. So, with that introduction of the inspirations, let me jump into some short readings to draw you into the story a bit. The first talks about the witches of Occoquan. Wicca, as many of you know, is a nature-based religion. It's growing in popularity here in the United States. And it's a practice of faith that seeks gods and goddesses in creation. So this is one approach to looking at and relating to our creation. Not a Christian approach, but one that is growing in popularity and attracting many people at this time. So let me share with you a brief account from the beginning of the book. Harley's story begins on an evening walk through River Mill Park in the town of Occoquan, Virginia. The streetlights that dotted the perimeter of the small park were not working on that September night, so the place was strangely dark, and its black-topped walking path vanished quickly in front of him, disappearing into the void. At the entrance of the park, he hesitated, feeling as though he were about to jump into a dark and mysterious lake, not knowing the depth of the water or what hazards lay below the surface. Fortunately, the moon was full on that Monday night, and the park was bathed in an unearthly glow. Once the streetlights of the town were behind him, and his eyes had time to adjust, the moonlight gave him sufficient illumination to find his way. Stepping into the park and beginning his walk along the path, he saw that the moon made everything look like it had been painted in various shades of teal, which was an odd color for the placid Occoquan River to his right and the hulking oak trees to his left. But Harley began to enjoy this unusual filter on the familiar scenery, and he soon noticed that there were eerie moon shadows under the park's benches along the way. Then, as he was nearing the western end of the park, he saw another light, yellow flames dancing out of the top of a large steel drum. Dark silhouettes were moving in front of the flames, figures walking slowly in a circle. His heart beat faster, and Harley wondered if he should turn around and head home. Caution pulled him in one direction and curiosity the other. And as he stopped and stood in place, he began to hear people chanting in a strange, guttural language. The group was made up of about a dozen people dressed in loose, flowing clothing, and they seemed to be riveted on each other and on the flames at the center of their circle. Then his heart jumped as he realized what he was seeing: the witches of Occoquan. So that sets up the beginning of the story and introduces Harley to some people in the town that he will interact with in some pretty powerful ways. So I'll move us on now to another scene. This is reading 2, When the Heavens Opened. Early in the book, heavy rains begin to fall. The streets flood. A candle shop is swept away, and a body is found in the debris. So I'll share with you the story of Harley's experience with this flood. And we'll just point out before I do that this picture you're seeing is flooding in the town of Occoquan. So my story is not pure fantasy. River towns are very vulnerable to climate change and to the danger of flooding, and we have had it here, sometimes in some disastrous ways. So, when the heavens opened, rain pounded on the roof of Harley's house, banged on the windows, and rattled down the gutters all through the night. Union Street, which runs from Commerce Street down to Mill Street, had become a river. A torrent of black water, several feet deep, was running toward the Occoquan River, swelling, rolling, and ripping merchandise from the porches of shops along the street. Harley thought he heard a train, but then realized that the sound was being made by the water as it roared through town, causing even parked cars to rise up, spin around, and crash into buildings. Logs and large branches were being carried downhill, along with lawn chairs and pieces of fencing. And while some of the debris spilled left and right onto Mill Street, most of it flowed directly into the Occoquan River. In the glow of the streetlights, he could see that the gravel parking lot that stood between Mill Street and the river was now submerged. It had become a muddy delta, linking the two rising, churning bodies of water. Up the hill were 2 police officers on Commerce Street, trying to set up barricades in the pouring rain, but the sawhorses they tried to put in place were immediately swept away. Harley was breathing quickly, frightened by what he was seeing, but also awestruck, witnessing a force that could destroy anything in its path. A line from Genesis came to mind. The waters swelled so mightily on the earth that all the high mountains under the whole heaven were covered. Surely an exaggeration, he thought, but not too far from the truth. So the town floods, a candle shop is swept away, a body is found in the debris, setting up a mystery for Harley and the people of the town. Who is the man who died? What caused his death? On to Copan Ruinas for the third of my readings. In the book, Harley joins a mission trip to La Entrada, Honduras, the same place my church has sent teams now for 20 years. On the trip, he begins to behave erratically. One day, he leaves the group on a kind of a spiritual quest. So here's another level of mystery to the book. What in the world is going on with Harley Camden? So I'll take you to this scene, which occurs at breakfast at a hotel in the town of La Entrada. The organizer of the trip is a dentist named Bill Stanford, They're doing a dental clinic in this town. And also present are two members of Harley's church, Gretchen Bennett and Juan Irazzo. And so the scene kicks off with them having breakfast together with Harley. Bill Stanford, the dentist, took a long sip of coffee and then said to Harley, "What are your plans today? Would you like to share them with us?" "No," said Harley, taking a bite of dry toast. "You all do what you need to do at the clinic, and I'll do what I need to do." Bill nodded and said, "Okay." He was concerned about Harley and his behavior, but also relieved that he wouldn't be causing problems for the clinic operation. "Harley, you do your thing, and we'll see you at dinner." That was the plan, but it didn't work out. Harley left the hotel at the same time as the rest of them, but he didn't return in the evening. He wasn't back by sunset, and by 10 o'clock, Bill and Gretchen were becoming deeply concerned. They talked with the hotel clerk about whether he had received any messages from Harley. The answer was no. And whether the Honduran police could handle a missing persons investigation. The answer was not very well. Then, as they were feeling panic set in, the phone at the desk rang. A priest from the Catholic Church in the town of Occoquan Ruinas had Harley at his rectory, and he wasn't sure what to do with him. The desk clerk had limited ability to translate Spanish into English, so Gretchen fetched Juan Irazzo to tell them what the priest was saying. "This man, Harley Camden, showed up at our church this afternoon after spending the morning at the Mayan ruins. He prayed in our church until we closed at 8 o'clock, and then he asked if he could pray all night. We said no, and we asked what he was doing there. He said that he had been in the archaeological park praying for an end to human suffering, for the coming of God's new heaven and new earth, for the arrival of the new Jerusalem." Bill and Gretchen shook their heads as Juan provided this translation, wondering what in the world had possessed Harley to go on this bizarre quest. "He was hungry, so we fed him," said the priest. "Now, what do you want us to do with him?" Juan said that they really wanted to get Harley back to La Entrada, but he wouldn't be able to drive the van to Occoquan Ruinas until the morning. The priest offered to keep him in the rectory, give him some breakfast, and allow him to pray in the church until Juan arrived. "Thank you," said Juan, while Bill and Gretchen shared their appreciation as well. "Just one more question, Father. How did Harley get to you?" "He hitchhiked," said the priest, "over 60 kilometers. I don't know how he did it, but he did. He's a man on a mission." "Indeed he is," said Bill to Gretchen, "just not the mission that the rest of us are on." So the plot thickens with the mystery of what's causing Harley to go on this quest and why he's behaving in such a bizarre way. Well, let me share with you now the fourth and final reading, Lord of the Rock. Harley returns to Occoquan. He is beginning to get his thoughts together again and remembering how important faith and fitness has been to him, he goes for a walk. He takes a mile walk around the town, across the pedestrian bridge into the woods, up the road, until he sees these large rocks which have been standing beside Occoquan for hundreds of millions of years. And he begins to find peace as he sits and reflects on this 300 million year old rock. So I'll share this with you, and then we can move into some time of conversation of some of these themes and other thoughts about climate solutions being offered by fiction. So, seeking to get his body and soul back together, Harley took a walk across the pedestrian bridge and up the road which ran along the Occoquan River on the northern bank. The sun had set, but there was still enough light to illuminate the charcoal gray outcroppings of rock that rose up from the edge of the river and undergirded the road along the ridge. Harley knew that the rocks were old, formed about 300 million years ago, in the era in which the North American and African land masses slowly plowed into each other and created a supercontinent called Pangaea. When the supercontinent began to separate into the continents we know today, it left behind the shelves of rock that stand on either side of the Occoquan River. These ancient formations have been around forever, thought Harley. Putting his hands on a rock by the roadside, one with a flat top around 3 feet high and 6 feet wide, he knew that he was making a connection with something much bigger than himself. Sitting down on the rock, he had the strange sensation that his center of gravity was moving out of his head. It moved down, 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 past his shoulders and chest and waist, and deep into the stone beneath him. What, he wondered, had this massive rock witnessed as it looked over the town of Occoquan? Native Americans and settlers, revolutionary soldiers and redcoats, slave owners and abolitionists, blacks and whites, and now an odd collection of witches and Jews and Christians and Muslims. The rocks had seen it all, standing silently above the fading light on the Occoquan River. Pulling out his smartphone, Harley called up a psalm, number 18. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer, my God, my rock in whom I take refuge. Harley read it and then repeated it. Get outside your head, he thought to himself. Let yourself rest in the Lord of the rock. This is what is really real, he realized, a fortress that can stand strong against any assault. Lean on this, rely on this, the rock in which you can take refuge. The Lord is my rock, my fortress, and my deliverer. Harley repeated it to himself over and over and over again. So the mystery remains. What caused the flood? Here you see Occoquan flooded in 1972 when Hurricane Agnes came through. Why did Harley have his breakdown? Who killed the man in the debris? No spoilers here. You're going to have to read the book. And so let's turn now to some questions about the town of Occoquan, faith and fitness, Copan, Honduras, Wicca, God and creation, Harley Camden, or yours truly, Henry Brinton.
Thanks, Henry. Thanks so much for that. Wow, amazing. I had so much fun reading the book, and as if you weren't convinced from that and you need me to convince you, please go get a copy of Windows of the Heavens, especially for folks like this who are interested in religion and interfaith dialogue and community resilience and how all of that is even more important in a time of climate change. What a beautiful story to invite us into thinking more deeply about all of those themes. So thanks for that overview, Henry. If you have any questions, you can drop them into the chat, as Carol says. We're going to have a little bit of a dialogue, Henry and me right now, and then we'll move into a time of Q&A with you all. Henry, I want to start off with this quote from the When the Heavens Opened section. Surely an exaggeration, he thought, but not too far from the truth. And I think there's something there about the unthinkability of the climate disasters that are happening in our world right now, that they seem like an exaggeration. That if we actually spend time to look at um, the depth of what's happening in some of these disasters. If, let's take Hurricane Helene for an example. If we really take time to pause and think that here's a tropical system that gained speed as it moved over soil because the soil was so warm and had a devastating impact on a place that considered itself a climate refuge, right? There's something unthinkable about this. Um, it reminds me of Amitav Ghosh, who is a fellow fiction writer of yours, Indian man who has written several wonderful fiction books about ecological connections and climate change. But he has a nonfiction book called The Great Derangement, where he reflects on the role of fiction in opening up our imaginations to climate change. And one thing he says that has me thinking about is that the great challenge of climate fiction is that even if you tell the stories of climate disasters that are happening now, they won't be believable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I've seen this too in a book like Ministry for the Future, this Cli-Fi
Yes.
book that came out a couple of years ago, where in the opening chapter, there's a heat wave in India that kills 1 million people, which is absolutely conceivable that could very well happen, and yet is a little bit unthinkable. So after all of that preamble, to get to the question here, Henry, I guess I'm just wondering, how do we use fiction and stories to open up the imagination so that people actually see what is happening around us and are able to start actually thinking and perceiving the unthinkable?
Mm. Thank you for mentioning Ministry for the Future. What a great book that is. And in fact, I use that as the basis of a sermon, which I just stole his title. My sermon was called Ministry for the Future. And of course, in the book, it's an international ministry, a UN kind of ministry. But my challenge to my congregation was, what is our ministry for the future? And so there's some great insights in there and some great stories that can be told in a very compelling way. But your question is a great one. How can we use fiction to imagine the scale of this crisis we're facing? And the book, of course, Windows of the Heavens, gets its title from the great flood in the book of Genesis. And I think we have lulled ourselves into thinking that this could never happen again. There could never be such a flood. And some people take consolation from God saying, I will never destroy all life in a flood again, as though that's a guarantee that something this devastating will never happen. But we are creating the possibility of those kinds of catastrophic floods. And the most recent disaster in Western North Carolina is such a great example of that, because that was an area that very few people thought would be vulnerable to flooding. We think about coastlines, we think about riverfront towns such as Occoquan, but this is a global crisis. And I think fiction can draw us into seeing those possibilities. And maybe even reading scripture in a new way as well. The great flood of Genesis has a lot of different meanings, but at least one meaning, the very literal meaning, is that waters can have incredibly destructive power.
Mm-hmm. I want to pick up on something you said there, Henry. I'm curious about how can stories like Windows of the Heavens and other fiction, especially climate fiction, inform and shape the way that we approach our sacred texts? How does that sort of help us cultivate the ways of reading our scriptures that help us live better in this climate change time?
Mm. Well, there are, of course, many, many passages in Scripture that can be proclaimed and presented to congregations, studied by congregations. One passage that I have found to be really fruitful for preaching and teaching is the Revelation 21 vision of a new heaven and a new earth, where in the New Jerusalem there is harmony between the natural world and the built world.
Right.
There's a river flowing through the center of the city, and the trees on either side have leaves for the healing of the nations. And so um, that is a vision that really can preach and can draw people into taking action to create a greater harmony between our built world and the natural world. And that can be done in a variety of ways. But that has really had some traction in my congregation
Yeah.
to give people an idea of what we are working towards.
Right. Right. Well, and in, in Revelation 21, and the home of God is among mortals.
Mhm.
Right? This kind of apocalyptic vision of Revelation is not about the destruction of the world to be whisked off somewhere else, but God coming here and restoring and living among us, and sort of the trajectory of God over the course of the biblical stories is coming ever closer and closer and closer to creation
That's right.
until
The New Jerusalem
everything.
comes down out of heaven.
Right.
We don't have
Right.
to lift it up to heaven.
Yeah. Um, I want to ask about apocalypse because in our kind of cultural vernacular, apocalypse is end of the world, destruction. But in our Christian tradition, or if we take the Greek literally here, apocalypse is unveiling or unfolding, or maybe showing something that is hidden. I'm wondering if as you were writing Windows of the Heavens, and as you've started to, think more about climate fiction in the process, how do you approach apocalyptic literature? Has that been informative for you in this process?
Well, certainly there's some of the characters in the book that have that more typically evangelical view of apocalyptic literature, where uh, our job as people of faith is not to improve this world, but to prepare ourselves for the end of the world and our rapture, or whatever form that takes, being lifted up into heaven. And there's some characters in Windows of the Heavens that very much have that view. But I think when the danger to a town like Occoquan is revealed by a climate event, it has the ability to change hearts and minds because people are living it. It is very real. The characters in the book who have that kind of otherworldly view of the end of the world suddenly are hit in the face by this tremendous threat, this environmental threat to the town. So once again, using fiction as a way to create characters and scenarios that enable people to make discoveries and grow through the course of a book is part of the joy of writing fiction. And one thing that I've said to people who ask me about the process is, I say, one of the things I love about fiction is I don't really know what the characters are going to do. I have a general idea of the trajectory of the book, but once I create these characters and give them hearts and minds and backstories and real personalities, they start interacting with each other in some fascinating ways. And you see that in Windows of the Heavens with Harley's interaction with a Jewish friend who's very active in local creation care, when Harley is kind of skeptical of it at the beginning. There's a more evangelical pastor who doesn't really want to have any involvement in creation care. So it's fun to see how they interact and how they make sense of their world in relationship to each other.
Yeah, yeah. Henry, just as the characters changed in the process of writing the book, I might venture a guess that you changed as well. I'm curious to hear, how did writing this book change your approach to climate change? How did it change your approach to community? And how did it change how you understand your vocation as a pastor?
Those are three big questions right there.
You could just choose one if you want.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of how it has changed me in terms of engaging my church members and my community with climate issues, it definitely has had an impact. My entering into this imaginary world with the crisis being felt by the people of Occoquan has made the danger all the more real to me. And so my own commitment to and involvement with my church's green team has deepened, and I see it as being a much more central ministry in our church than I did before. I've also come to appreciate how it is really a ministry that touches all of our areas of mission and ministry. It has had it's a team that has worked with our church's property management ministry, with our mission outreach ministry, with our member connections ministry. There are ways in which these issues do draw people together and touch all of the different ministry areas of the church. So, in a sense, I've come to see it as a team. We call it the Green Team, with wide-ranging influence in the church, and also a team that has the ability to pull people together and to work on common goals.
Mm-hmm. Before I hand it back to Carol to facilitate the audience Q&A, I'm curious to hear what else has been stoking the fires of your imagination. What books or film or other media have you been consuming recently that has you it's kind of opening your mind up?
So my concern, I think shared by a lot of you on this call, is with the polarization of our congregations, our communities, our country. And so one of my latest reads was The Demon of Unrest by Eric Larson, talking about what happened after the election of 1860, the election of Lincoln as president, and the forces that led to Fort Sumter and the beginning of the Civil War. My personal interest in that history is connected to my third book in the Mill Street Mysteries, which came out in February of this year, the book called War Bug, which is also a small town mystery, but it's different than my previous books in that I have alternating chapters in the book between Occoquan 1862 and Occoquan 2022. And so Occoquan was a town very involved in the Civil War, but in an interesting way. This is not my imagination. This is historically accurate. Occoquan was a southern town, seceding from the Union along with the rest of the state of Virginia, but a lot of its residents were Quakers. And so they were abolitionists, they were Unionists, they were supporters of Abraham Lincoln, and they were challenged to continue to live together with their Southern sympathizer neighbors and to find a way to continue to be in community. And so I've been inspired by that. And if you choose to read War Bug, you'll see some of the suggestions that my characters make, or that I make through my characters, about how we can pull our communities together at a very fractured time.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Henry. Carol, I'm going to hand it over to you now to facilitate some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Henry. That was just, well, to both of you, but that was just delightful. I really, really enjoyed that conversation. So we have a couple of questions. The first one from Larry. I heard that immigration from Central America has been prompted by failing subsistence and small-scale farming because of climate change. And have you seen evidence of this in Copan? And do you have anything to say on the topic generally?
Well, I don't want to give away too much from the book, but it's probably not saying too much to hint that one of the major reasons that Occoquan collapsed was an environmental issue. And researchers are finding that that was one of the dominant issues, much more than politics or any other factors that were going on within the society at that time. So Central America has suffered from environmental issues at numerous times through its history. I think that while I can't point to particular individuals in Occoquan that might have fled Central America because of the degradation of the environment, we certainly have seen an enormous increase in immigrants from Central America over the last few years, which has changed the face of both Occoquan and Woodbridge and Prince William County, Virginia, which is the county that we are in. So that brings a lot of marvelous people who serve our community well. It has also led to an increase in gang violence, which Carol mentioned earlier in her quick overview of my book. So that plays a role in the book as well. So a lot of upheaval, and no doubt a lot of it is related to climate change.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I would just add that all of the issues that we care about as people of faith and followers of Christ are impacted by climate change, including immigration and including small farming. And so it all becomes intertwined and is part of our call to really work on climate change, which leads to the next question from Carol Boyd. Is Occoquan being led toward prevention or preparing for future climate disasters? And in what way are the faith communities involved in that discussion preparation?
So the town is very much taking climate change seriously and working on infrastructure to make sure that we can handle future flood events. I can't say that the faith community is in Occoquan is doing a lot because the town is so very small. And as I said at the beginning, it only has about 1,000 residents, and there is not currently any church in town. There was a historic African-American church that was built after the Civil War and served its congregation well for about 100 years until they outgrew it, moved to a larger building elsewhere. It then became a Spanish-speaking Pentecostal church. It's now a mosque. So just a sign of the rapid change in the community. But most residents of Occoquan will leave the town to go to their churches or other places of worship. So I can't really speak to Occoquan as a center of faith-based climate action. In my book, however, the Little Riverside Methodist Church becomes very involved. And that is in my imagination, but that congregation doesn't really exist. I will say through Northern Virginia, a lot of churches are really wrapping their arms around these issues. And so Occoquan will benefit from those efforts on a more regional level.
Thank you. I just want to first just say thank you for spending this hour with us. It has really been just so fruitful and just a delight. So, and I give you great thanks for your writing and your sharing with us of your talents and your heart. And also, I just want to give you great thanks for your leadership on climate and the way that you preach and teach and hold these as so very important. And I just want to say to everyone here today that all of us are in this together and that we know that community is really central. So our relationships, our community, our churches within our local communities are absolutely critical in solving climate change or addressing towards climate solutions. And so I invite you to get engaged, and not just get engaged within your own congregation, but to reach out to other congregations in your denomination or in your community and inviting them into this work with you. And Creation Justice Ministries, One Home, One Future, Blessed Tomorrow, and so many others are involved in this work and offer support and resources for you to lead in your congregation and your community. So I've just put a bunch of links in there, but I would just encourage you to stay connected. Sign up for the newsletter for CJM, sign up for the newsletter for Blessed Tomorrow, join One Home, One Future, and just connect to others. We give great thanks that all of you showed up today. We want to be true to the time. So please stay in touch with us, and many blessings. Avery, any last words?
That's it. Thanks, Carol. Thanks for co-hosting. Thanks so much, Henry. Good to be with you. Thanks
Well,
for
great to be with you all. And I'll just, if I could just make a final offer to everyone on the call. I would be happy to do a similar presentation to your congregations, to green teams. If you think having this book introduced to anyone in your world would be helpful, just reach out to me here at Fairfax Presbyterian Church in Fairfax, Virginia.
Thank you so much. Blessings, everyone.
Everyone.
Take care and be well.